morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for this session, which is on peak performance. My name is Richie Jean from Future Lines. I'll chair and moderate the session. This is Marie from Totem Sports. This is David from Shandong. You can pronounce it better than I can. The CSL club. The way the session's going to work is David's going to give us a presentation on big data and how to use data from a peak performance perspective. Then we'll open up the session to a Q&A. So, David, do you want to kick us off?
Okay, yeah. The time is short, so I will start right away. I will cut it short as well. I will show a little bit on how we utilize data in the club to gain competitive advantage, to gain peak performance. So I stole a slide from Chris Earle, who is the head of the education on the English FA, asking the question, is the coach a scientist or an artist? And I think that's a very, very good question to ask, because there's more and more data involved in the game. We can collect more data. And the English FA, for example, wants to transfer their traditional decision-making into data-driven decision-making by 2022. So, for me, what is data? Everything is data. If a little kid touches a hot plate, it processes data. So in the football club, we have a lot of different areas. I call them departments or modules. So all these departments will generate data. For me, first of all, the data should be stored for knowledge management. Because in my first club, there was a lot of transitions of staff, and every time a staff member left, they took the knowledge away from the club. So we designed the system to keep the knowledge where it belongs in the club. Then, of course, you want to do the next step, you want to do research on it. You want to communicate, I will touch base later on that. Communication is very, very crucial in the football club in Europe, but in China even more. You want to aggregate data to finally do predictions. Where does our way lead? Where do our players end up if we treat them like we treat them? So we gathered all these departments around one centralized system, which we called the Luneng Lab. So a data storage that can store data and aggregate data and work on synergies around those data points. The amount of data is also crucial. And I have the feeling sometimes that confusion rises with the amount of data you have. And I would like to use a quote of a friend of mine, Dr. Fergus Connolly. Data is not the answer for everything, but data will allow you to ask better questions. It will allow you to communicate better, and it will allow you to really step back one step to say, are we really doing the right thing? So where's the data coming from? I'll just give a few examples, and I'm rushing through the presentation to not steal precious time from my co-mates here. So we have a lot of event data. Normally you get the event data from official suppliers like Amisco or Opta in the MLS in the UK. But you always have to put in perspective, never trust a number that you not validated yourself. We did a little quality check, and I did blank out the providers because I think it's down to everyone to evaluate that. So if you see the corners, for example, the discrepancy in corners is not very high because it's a very, very set definition on what a corner is. But if you look at passing accuracy and crosses, there's a huge difference in numbers. So if you aggregate those numbers without knowing what is going on, your result will be wrong. So I always questioning what is happening there. How is it mined and what is the definition behind it? Because when it comes to duels and passes, definition is crucial. So never trust just numbers, try to validate themselves. That's why we work with a third-party provider to really validate the data, but the key performance stats, I'm a fan of doing that live in-house to really be in control of what you do. And we talk about tracking data, the physical data. So we have official suppliers. TrackUp is the biggest company that does video tracking. And then you have mobile providers like Catapult, StatSports, GPS-based. But you have to bear in mind, video and GPS you can barely compare because it's a different mining method. There will always be differences. So at Chandang Luneng, we try to be at the forefront of technology. So we evaluated the systems, and you see this is a GPS square run. That's just a limitation of what technology can do. So we work with a company now which is called Player Maker. And Player Maker is a state-of-the-art technology that gives you tracking data, gives you event data, and integrates that with video. For me, this will be the future of football, because this will allow us to instantly give video feedback after a session. Before that, we did not have event data from training sessions. And you see in a match, we gather around 2,400 event data points. But we only have 40 matches a season. But we have 250 training sessions a season. So in 250 training sessions, there's a lot more happening where I need event data. For a 14-year-old kid, I don't need to know how fast or how much he can run. That is interesting later on. But his technical ability is, for me, very, very important. So this technology will give us, I think, a future-proof basement to then look into injury risk models, to look into really benchmarking performance. Is a midfield player using both of his legs, or is he very, very single-legged? The most important thing for me that you can control, because it's very difficult to go to those big data providers and say, please change your definitions. I like to go down to what I can control, and that's the staff. So all the physios, all the scouts, all the coaches, you can control that because you can set your own definitions in your club. So we collect data from every match and every training. We film every session. We wear catapult devices. We wear the Player Maker. We collect medical data, so every injury is logged, every treatment is logged, everything that is done to the player is logged. We evaluate the player after every match and every training. So quick evaluations after every match and after every training to really know what is going on there. We do a lot of scouting. That is an example from my old club where we have the full scouting report, and then this allows me to compare my scouts. Are my scouts doing what they do? Because for me, scouting and evaluation is the same. An evaluation is an internal scouting, and a scouting is an external evaluation. So in this case, that's a real example of a player I signed in Vancouver. We scouted him with a perspective score of 7.2. Once we got the player involved, we had more data of him, and then his given score was 7, his perspective score was 9. So this was a control mechanism for me to see my scouts are doing their work. Because imagine they scouted him 7.2, we get him in the club, and the coaches evaluate him with 2 or 4 or whatever. So data will help you to really keep track on what you're doing. We log every training session because that is very, very important, and I think this will link later on to Marie's thoughts on nutrition. You need to know what you do with your players to really see where they're going. Why are they tired? How can we achieve peak performance? Because you want to peak on the match day. This is what you want. All your weekly training leads to only one point, being match ready. So we log every session in the first team in the academy. We can see what is going on there. What did they train? We have video logged to it. We have all the physical data logged to it. So we can really, really monitor, is the workload good? Is the training's content good? Because for me, the platform we created is a 360-degree evaluation tool. One example, let's say you want your left back to improve his left foot crossing. So you say he's now 6 out of 10, you want him to become an 8 out of 10. After 6 months, you sit down with that player and you say, okay, you're still a 6 out of 10. For me, that could have 3 reasons. First of all, the player just reached his peak performance. He cannot become better. Second of all, he did not maybe train enough. If you log every session, you know he trained 10,000 minutes on left foot crossing. He should have improved his left foot crossing by now. And all the coaches like that. The third one, the coaches don't like too much. Maybe the coaching is not right. That is the reality of it, because we're all human beings. One coach is better than the other coach. And we not only do that with the coaches, we also do that with the physiotherapists. Imagine you have 5 ACL injuries and one physiotherapist needs 30% more time than the other one. So you can identify weaknesses in your daily workflow. So I don't think that's the right format. But again, this is a screenshot from our gym. We have devices where the player log on with a fingerprint, and then they get the individualized trainings plan, and we also record what they are doing. We work in the space of virtual reality because, in my opinion, a lot has been done on physical performance, on nutrition side, but on the cognitive side, things have not developed as fast. So we work with a company based in Barcelona that does cognitive training via virtual reality to realize passing lanes before they appear. After that, we can then put that into the training cycle, and we can really control that with our player maker tool to say, okay, he has the ability to realize the passing lanes. Now we need to work on the technical ability to achieve that. One of the most important thing that, in my opinion, clubs don't really focus too much is the players. So we collect data from our players. We developed a little WeChat application. So the players log on their WeChat. You know, WeChat is very big in China. We try to do it with an app solution, but WeChat is so convenient and so powerful that we can utilize WeChat to ask the player some questions every day. So you see, we collect a lot of data, and it's just an example. I could talk like 5 hours on what we do, but time is running very short. So what are we doing with this data? We want to utilize all this data to aggregate it and to communicate with the players. A player log on screen, the player has his personalized calendar. So every information we have on the player, we have in one system stored. We can create video files for the player, and we can share that, again, via WeChat. WeChat is a very powerful tool, so the player gets video notifications from the coaches, from the analysts, to really work on his performance. This is our performance section where we store all our data we have on just the performance side, on the testing sides. And then our latest project is an injury risk model. We work with a company called Kitman Labs, very, very advanced company. So this is actually live data. 60% of all our injuries can be identified prior to the injury if we keep our injury risk model on date, if we collect all the data every day, the catapult data or the tracking data, if we get the nutrition right. Nutrition is a big topic we're working on now. So this is what you want to do with it, because collecting data is always a lot of work. And sometimes you don't know what to do with the data, but I'm a big fan of collecting as much data as possible to later aggregate it. We are working, for example, now on a greenkeeping module, where the greenkeepers log their daily work, because later we can then compare injuries happened on pitch 7 more than on pitch 6. Why is that? What did the greenkeepers do? How hard was the pitch? How high was the grass? How much water was on the pitch? So the big data will give you a lot of possibilities to do aggregations with it. You have to collect the data, you have to store it, because you cannot go back to collect the data. You have to collect it now, but you need to do it. For me, why I do this, I compare that to the pit lane in Formula 1, where, in my opinion, this is the club, or the team, or whatever, and this is a decision maker. I see my job in the role as giving them the best possible options to make a decision. Do I want to make their decisions? No, I'm not making their decisions, because that's up to the leaders, that's up to the head coach, that's up to the president, up to the physiotherapist. But our role should be to give him the best possible tools to make the best possible decision. If this driver of this race car goes left in the right turn, I cannot control that, but I can make sure that his car is the fastest on the circuit. And as we go along, I'm in China now for 2.5 years. It's always developing. Technology is developing. So the GPS technology is around for a long time. It's time for something new, for example, in this area. But the virtual reality, the augmented reality, gives us in the future lots of room for improvement. And that's why I like this road. The road to success is always under construction. So we're working hard to keep in the forefront of technology. And yeah, again, the time is very short. If you have any questions on that specific system after, come to see me. But I don't want to take the time away from my colleagues here. So let's discuss the peak performance.
Okay. Okay, so Marie, do you want to just give us a quick introduction into Totem for the people that may not have heard of the product?
Yeah, no worries. Thanks very much for that. It was a really good presentation. So I'm the nutritionist at Totem Sport, and we actually have a natural mineral supplement. So each sachet contains 78 minerals and trace elements, and it's actually harvested 30 meters below plankton blooms in the ocean, so it is 100% natural. We don't add any preservatives, sugars, or flavorings to the product. And it actually has 125 years of science behind it. So it was actually previously used as a pharmaceutical. Back in France 125 years ago, a French physiologist came up with a theory that life evolved in the sea, and therefore there was something in the sea that could be of benefit to the human body. And in the past 4 years, it's actually been developed as a sports product, because obviously if you optimize the health of the athlete, then they can perform better and recover better.
Does anybody from the floor have any questions that you want to ask? Or shall I just kick in with some that I've got? Okay, so this is probably a question for both of you guys, really. What do you see as the difference between recovery and repair?
That's a good question. I think when we talk about recovery, it's not only the physical recovery, it's also the mental recovery. What we see in the professional sports, that the mental recovery sometimes is more important than the physical recovery. Especially when you play 3 competitions, sometimes it's just good to just get your head free, rather than doing the ice chamber or doing like a regeneration session. The repair, of course, the repair is very important when we talk about getting players match ready again. You have to repair players, because if you don't repair players, they get more broken. So for me, the recovery is a bit different to the repair. The repair, you really focus on an actual problem, where the recovery is a more holistic approach to full body and mind.
Okay. Marie?
Yeah, I completely agree. There's a difference in recovery and repair. So recovery, although a lot of people associate it with starting at the end of exercise, recovery actually happens multiple times throughout a game, throughout exercise, and it's about optimizing recovery for the athlete. So recovery is very short term, whereas repair is a long term thing. So recovery is when throughout the day, multiple times, whereas repair is at night, whenever you're repairing your immune system, your gut health, your blood sugar levels, and without the repair, the recovery isn't optimized. So they are 2 different things, but I think often people forget the recovery actually happens throughout the day, as opposed to just after the training session or the match.
Okay. David, probably one more for you. What have you found the differences between the use of data within your sphere of football from China to Europe? What are the major differences?
I would not say that there's a difference in the data itself. I think China is a very, very technology-focused country. I'm German, so from the German perspective, it's way more difficult to go to a head coach and talk to him about data, because it's, again, my first slide, is the coach an artist or a scientist? In Germany, he's more an artist at that stage. He will transform into a scientist. I think I was the only one in my coaching team in my first club that came from a university. So all former players that say like, no, we always did it like this, and my gut feeling tells me how much I can load the players. When I then transitioned into Major League Soccer, into America, the approach was different. So the performance guy could walk on the pitch to the coach saying, look, he's very high in his load. In Germany, he could never do that. And in China, from what I experience, is China's very eager, very ambitious to improve their football. China lacks that football history that Europe has, of course, because football in Europe is in place, is the best. I mean, every little kid wants to be a football player in Europe. In China, it's different. So I think China will utilize data even more than Europe, because data will allow you to take some shortcuts to peak performance.
Okay, so building on that, someone could take the data that they've got based on a player.
Yeah.
And
I think that guy had a question.
sorry.
Yeah.
How do you use the data for recovery training and once again, how do we use the data for recovery and tactical periodization during the week?
Yeah, so because our sample size of data is quite big, our library, our trainings library, allows us to predict the outcome of a training session. Because if you did 50 sessions 99 with those players, you factor the temperature in, you know what load you can expect. So with our injury risk model then, we can say, and periodization in the academy is totally different than to the first team. The first team we periodize weekly. In the academy we do that monthly or annually. So we use the data to really give feedback to the coaches. So when the coach selects his player for this drill, the system will give you a warning saying, at the moment this player is high of risk because he didn't sleep well, he ran a lot in the last match, he has some soreness in his leg, so be careful with him, and the system will then allow you to select different drills. So the data plays a role, but in the end it also comes down to a more team dynamic. Those players are not machines. They have mind, so sometimes you need to get him involved and you need to allow him to maybe not do the full sprints in the 99 because he is tired. It varies from case to case.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi, sorry. I just wanted to ask, we're obviously aware of the benefits that data-driven performance brings, but do you see any limits to what the data can actually do?
Is that for me? Or?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
generally?
I think we are far away to have reached the limits because the technology was just lagging or is still lagging. So again, I collect as much data as I can. Do I collect enough? I don't think so. I think, and it's also a very thin line on not annoying people. If you annoy the head coach every day that he has to fill out like 4 hours of data collection, that might be a bit difficult to achieve. But no, I don't think we have reached the ceiling yet. I think when it comes to talent identification, if the sample size is big enough, let's play the numbers game. We have 1.4 billion people in China. If you would have a centralized database like we have in all of China, you put your algorithms in, you can automatically identify talent. When I worked in the Major League Soccer in Vancouver, we had a lot of remote academies all over Canada. Canada is a big country. And then we identified a player, age of 14, who was playing out of position. The numbers showed us that this player could be a potential, so we took him in, and he was sold for a big sum to Bayern Munich last year. So that is a first return on investment on using data, but we are not on the ceiling yet. The products need to improve. There is no centralized database, in my opinion. That's why we build our own. The products out there are not sophisticated enough, in my opinion, to do what they should do. So I see a big, not a renaissance because it has never been there, but I see a big explosion on data-driven decision-makings on data platforms and data collection.
I think the key for me is analyzing the data. So depending on what data you're collecting, it has to be relevant to what you're actually going to analyze and what gains or goals you're trying to achieve from it. You can analyze as much as you want, you can collect as much as you want, and I think it's, as David said, the more data you have, the better, as long as you don't get lost in that fog of confusion because you have too much data, you're not going to achieve what you want. There's always more metrics, there's always new technology, there's always new ideas coming out, but are they relevant to you, and do you have the ability, or do your squad, your team, your academy have the ability to analyze that data sufficiently to give you what you want? Otherwise it just becomes another wasted tool.
Exactly. I think it has to have a purpose. People ask me, "Oh, you have so much data. What do you do with it?" I say, like, it's a tool. if I give my mom a Ferrari, she would still drive it like a Volkswagen, so there's no need to give her a Ferrari. That's why we need to work on those algorithms. We need to work on those. Does a head coach really need to understand how GPS works? I don't think so. Does he need people around him that understands it? Yes, he needs that. So you see coaching staff is growing exponentially everywhere with people that really know how to utilize the data. Because the data is I mean, you can lie with data. If you use it wrong, the data will always give you a wrong result. If you use wrong data, it will also give you a wrong result. So you have to make sure that the data is right, and then you have to make sure that you use it right. That is very important.
So unlike data, which still has a long way to go then, how far is nutrition reached in its journey? Has it still got a long way we can go to improve performance?
Yeah, well, in terms of Tomes Sport, it's completely different to all the other products that are on the market. So although I was saying there is 125 years of science behind the product, it's the actual only product in the world that contains all 78 minerals and trace elements. And because it's 100% natural, all the minerals and trace elements are absorbed by the body immediately and naturally. So it has an immediate effect on the athlete, optimizing their cellular health and their hydration. So it's a very new product on the market because there is nothing out there like it, but it's something that everyone can benefit from using.
Why is it important, the 78, you guys have
78 minerals and trace elements. Yeah.
That's like a mantra that you guys keep using. Is there a reason for that? Is there a magic number?
Well, because all the other electrolyte supplements are based on the other, like the main 5 or 6 electrolytes, they can't actually work effectively.
So your Gatorades, your
yeah, well,
sports recovery drugs.
there's so many other electrolyte supplements out there, but if you don't have all 78, each mineral and trace element can't work optimally, and that's because each one relies on 5 or 6 other elements for it to be absorbed and work optimally in the body. So magnesium, for example, it won't work to its maximum without the other 6 elements it relies on to be absorbed. So, and then each of those 6 rely on another 6. So without the full spectrum, each element can't work optimally.
So within your product, you're guaranteeing 100% absorption.
Yeah, so the benefits of it are reduction in cramp, better concentration and focus. We actually had a trial done recently that showed a 46% reduction in the buildup of lactic acid, which is a massive thing for cramp, resultant muscle injuries, and in recovery as well.
So tying that into your data system, we'd be able to know that the players had improved by taking your products, for example.
Yeah, of course. If you can measure that, I think for us, nutrition is a big topic, and in China especially. I spoke to Mats Davidson, who was the former technical director of Shanghai SIPG, and they brought a nutritionist in, and they looked at the food, and they said, okay, the white rice is the problem, that the players are not as lean as European players. So they took away the white rice. After 1 week, the players were very unhappy because it's a cultural thing. You grow up with white rice. So Sven-Göran Eriksson was the head coach at that time, so he said, I have a choice. I can get lean, unhappy players, or I can get a bit more chubby and happy players. So they put the white rice in, and this is why I think products like this will help massively, because it is the case. If you grow up with something, then it's tough to take that away, and we see that in China.
Is there any research done, especially on that product?
Yeah.
So that you say, because you told it's better for concentration, for stuff like this, that you had some research, and if yes, what?
So the research that we got is how it optimizes hydration in the cells. And because whenever you're more hydrated, your concentration is better, your focus is better, and the players and the athletes that use the product all continue to use it because of the benefits that they're seeing from using it. So, I mean, we're happy for you to test it yourself. But yeah, so it does have an immediate effect on the body, but we have got clubs that have done their own trials in terms of hydration, power output, recovery, and we've always got beneficial results from that.
Okay, any more questions from anybody? No questions? Okay, well, that wraps up our session. These guys are around if you want to have conversations. We're on the stands, so total on 160, we're on 168, and you're about.
I'm about.
So if you do want to grab somebody later, please feel free. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming.